somebody brings up something that actually is legitimate, I'll even have a conversation with them about it because I'm actually into interesting thought, and I don't have to even agree with you. Oh, but that's an interesting point.
Right.
That's an interesting point.
Did you catch the epic moment when Quentin Tarantino appeared on Real Time with Bill Maher? It was like watching a masterclass in pushing back against the nonsense of woke culture. Quentin Tarantino, the legend behind films like Kill Bill and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, sat down with Bill Maher for an interview that quickly became a highlight for anyone tired of the woke narrative dominating Hollywood. Maher, known for his own sharp critiques of political correctness, was the perfect host to bring out Tarantino's no-nonsense attitude.
Especially this last year, where ideology is more important than art.
Way more, certainly to the awards.
Yeah.
During the interview, Tarantino didn't hold back. When Maher brought up how people tried to shame and bully him over the lack of lines for Margot Robbie in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he said, if somebody brings up something that is actually legitimate, I'll even have a conversation with them about it because I'm actually into an interesting thought and I don't even have to agree with you, but that's an interesting point. Tarantino made it clear he's open to genuine critiques, but has no time for obligatory changes just to appease woke critics. He emphasized that ideology should never trump art. He said, there has become a thing that's gone on. It seems like in this, especially this last year, where ideology is more important than art. Ideology trumps art. Ideology trumps individual effort. Ideology trumps good. Maher was totally on board with Tarantino's perspective, saying, besides the great entertainment, I have always really appreciated the way you pushed back when anyone tried to stifle you, shut you up, shame you, bully you. Maher pointed out how rare it is to see someone in Hollywood refuse to apologize or bend the knee to woke demands. Maher even mentioned how ridiculous it is that people try to judge past works by today's standards. Nuts to blame someone for not being woke 30 years before woke became a thing. A sense of obligation that's been creeping into Hollywood, just to fit in with the latest woke trends. He said it himself. If someone brings up a legitimate critique, he's open to discussing it. But when it comes to being pressured to change his art for the sake of appeasing woke critics, he's not having it.
Trumps art. Ideology trumps individual effort. Ideology trumps good. Ideology trumps entertaining.
There's two kinds of movies, virtue signalers and superhero movies.
Think about it. Tarantino's argument is that ideology shouldn't trump art. He's not against diverse opinions or new perspectives. He just doesn't want his creative process dictated by what's currently politically correct. During his interview with Bill Maher, Tarantino made it clear that he's interested in genuine, thought-provoking discussions about his work. But when it comes to obligatory changes to fit a woke agenda, he's firmly against it. Critics went after him for Margot Robbie's portrayal of Sharon Tate, saying she didn't have enough lines. He made it clear that he's not interested in adding diversity or changing his characters just for the sake of being trendy. He'll do it where it makes sense for the story, but not just to check a box.
Well, I'll just take one more go at it. There's going to be a new golden age. Please be there and part of it.
Tarantino's response to these criticisms is a testament to his commitment to artistic integrity. He's not afraid to stand up for his vision, even if it means facing backlash from the woke crowd. And honestly, that's something we need more of in Hollywood. But ticking ideological boxes. He's all for discussing different viewpoints and engaging in meaningful conversations. He made this clear during his chat with Bill Maher. Tarantino talked about how there's been a shift where ideology has started to overshadow art. He said, ideology is more important than art. Ideology trumps individual effort. Ideology trumps good. Ideology trumps entertaining. This, for instance, think about all the films and TV shows that have been criticized or even canceled because they didn't fit the woke narrative. While diversity and sensitivity are important, they shouldn't come at the cost of genuine storytelling and creative freedom. There are other filmmakers and artists who share his perspective and have spoken out against the constraints of woke culture. He's known for his no-holds-barred approach to comedy and has often ridiculed the idea of censoring jokes to avoid offending people. Gervais believes in the power of humor to tackle controversial topics and sees woke culture as a threat to that freedom. He argues that comedy is about exploring uncomfortable truths and that being overly cautious about offending people stifles the art form.
Well, you couldn't say shit if you had a mouthful, all right? And every every bestseller, every play that was turned into a movie, if there was anything sexual about it or anything, okay, that's all going to be drained out of the movie. It's going to be weaned out of the movie. It's just the way it is.
They understand that true art often challenges norms and provokes thought, and they're not willing to sacrifice that for the sake of being politically correct. This meant no explicit language, no sexual content, and definitely no controversial topics. The result? Films that were sanitized and often lacked depth.
And to me, it's one of the worst decades in Hollywood is the 50s. And the 60s, pretty much from like 1960 to 1966, was the 50s part 2. Right. But then what we think of as...
Fast forward to today, and we see a different kind of censorship, one driven by woke culture. Instead of a formal code, we have an unwritten set of rules about what is considered acceptable. Filmmakers are pressured to include diverse characters, avoid offending any group, and ensure their stories align with current social and political norms. While the intentions behind this movement might be good, it often leads to the same kind of sanitized, unchallenging content we saw in the 1950s. Tarantino makes a compelling analogy about the cyclical nature of censorship in Hollywood. He pointed out that these waves of censorship come and go. In the 1950s, it was about maintaining moral standards during a time of social conservatism. Now, it's about adhering to woke ideals. But the effect is the same. It stifles creativity and limits what filmmakers can do. During his interview with Bill Maher, Tarantino explained how these cycles work. The impact of the Hays Code on creativity and storytelling was significant. Filmmakers had to get creative within the constraints, often resorting to innuendo and suggestion instead of explicit content. While this sometimes led to clever storytelling techniques, it also meant that many important issues couldn't be addressed openly. For example, films couldn't tackle subjects like racism, sexism, or political corruption in a straightforward manner. This limited the scope of storytelling and kept audiences from engaging with the full complexity of these issues.
Yeah. And that's an absolute positive response to the homogenized 50s.
So it's going to come back again.
Okay, and then it goes into the 70s, but then went into the 80s.
All right.
And that's why you came up with politically incorrect, because that was the first, this is basically the 80s